Hi, boys and girls. This is Mrs. P. I'm going to read this book by Mordecai Gerstein. It's called The Wild Boy, and it's based on a true story. And we're going to see what this is. This might be a little bit old for some kids, but let's see. It says, this is a dedication page. For my daughter, Risa, my sons, Jesse and Aaron, my grandchildren, Daisy and Hugh, and for the wild child and everyone, myself included. So here, I like these illustrations. Can you draw something like that? Anyway, once there was a boy who lived in the mountain forests of southern France. He lived completely alone, without mother, father, or friends. He didn't know what a mother or father was. He was naked. He didn't know what clothes were. He didn't know he was a boy or even a person. He didn't know what people were. He was completely wild. He knew how to live in the wild woods. He knew which plants, berries, and roots would nourish him. He was always hungry. He knew how to survive the harsh winters, the long, icy nights, and he didn't seem to feel the cold. No one but the animals knew... Oops, there he is in the tree. No one but the animals knew he lived there. He didn't talk to them because he didn't know what talking was. He didn't befriend them because he didn't know what friends were. Sometimes the fiercer animals attacked him. He had to fight. His body was covered with scars. I don't know what kind of animal that... Looks like it could be a wild boar. He loved the wind. He loved the snow. He loved the full moon. He loved the icy water from the mountain streams, and he drank with his chin touching the mossy rocks. He was completely wild. One gray winter morning, 3 men saw him. They were hunting. At first, they thought he was some kind of an animal. Then they weren't so sure. Oh, no. They chased him through the woods. He tried to escape up a tree, but they caught him. Look at... They brought him to a town, and the people stared at him. They had never seen a wild boy. He looked at the people. He didn't know what they were. He must have had parents, they said, but no one knew who they might be or how he came to live in the wild woods. And he didn't know either. The town officials took charge of him. They spoke to him, but he didn't listen. He didn't know what words were. He's deaf and mute, they said. He tried to run back to the mountains, but they caught him and put him on a leash. And when they first put clothes on him, he tore them off. They gave him a bed, but he wouldn't sleep in it. All he would eat was walnuts and baked potatoes still smoldering from the fire. He cared only for food and for freedom. Now they've put him in the newspapers. Word was sent to Paris. "A wild boy has been captured." It was in all the newspapers. They printed drawings that showed him with claws, fur, and a tail, and scientists and scholars wanted to study him. He was taken to Paris, over 300 miles from his mountains, by coach. As the coach clattered into the city, he didn't even look out the windows. The grand buildings and swarms of people didn't interest him. The forest was the only place he knew, and Paris wasn't a forest. He's probably terrified. He was taken to the Institute for Deaf Mutes to be examined and tested. They shouted at him and fired pistols near his ear. He didn't even blink, but they found he wasn't deaf. He turned his head when a walnut was cracked in the next room. He loved walnuts. He would not eat bread, meat, or sweets, but only nuts, boiled beans, and potatoes baked in the coals. He plucked them from the fire and ate them burning hot. "He seems to feel no pain," marveled the experts. They showed him toys and books, and they rang bells and played music. They poked him and pinched him. They couldn't get his attention. His mind was in the woods. His ears listened for wind and wolves, and he cared only for food and for freedom. Whoops. Oh, they're just making him look like a bug. After weeks of tests and examinations, experts made an announcement. "The boy's behavior," they said, "places him below all animals, wild or domestic. He is hopeless." And then they lost interest in him. Whoops. Except for one man. Jean-Marc Itard was a young doctor at the Institute. He was quiet and thoughtful. He saw the boy, ignored and uncared for, growing wilder than ever. Itard watched as the boy sat quietly by the lily pond and gazed into the water for hours. The boy's eyes were deep and sad, and from time to time he gently scattered a handful of dry leaves onto the surface of the water and watched them float away. Dr. Itard saw a boy who had never been held or sung to or played with. He saw a child who had never learned to be a child. He decided to take the boy home and care for him. "I will be your teacher," the doctor said to him. The doctor's housekeeper, Madame Guerin, a kind, motherly woman, tried to hug the boy when he arrived, but he grabbed her hand and sniffed it all over. He sniffed everything. "What's his name?" asked Madame Guerin, laughing. "I've noticed that he seems to like the sound O. His name should have that sound in it." "How about Victor?" asked Madame Guerin. The boy looked at her. "Victor," said the doctor. "I believe it will suit him." I think kindness suits him. They took Victor for long runs in the country. He went wild with joy. They made him comfortable in his own room and gave him plenty of his favorite foods. One morning it snowed. The doctor looked out and was amazed to see Victor naked and laughing, rolling in the snow. He hugged it to his body and stuffed his mouth with it. His skin, the doctor explained to Madame Guerin, has never learned the difference between hot and cold, rough and smooth. We have to teach him to feel. They gave Victor hot baths and massaged his scarred body. Victor began to feel the warmth of the water and the care in their hands, and after a few weeks, he wouldn't get into the water if it was too cold. On chilly mornings, he began to dress himself. He learned to use a spoon instead of his hands to take potatoes out of boiling water or the fire. He came to love the feel of Madame Guerin's velvet dress. But Victor's gaze still flitted from one thing to another. Only food got his full attention. The doctor had an idea. He showed Victor a walnut, then put it under a cup and mixed it up among other cups. Victor watched carefully and immediately turned over the right cup. The doctor hid the nut again, and Victor laughed and found it every time. Even when the doctor replaced the walnut with a ball, Victor always found it on the first try. "Bravo, Victor," cried the doctor. "You've learned to pay attention, and you've learned to play." He's delighted. Day after day, the doctor worked hard with Victor, trying to teach him to speak. Months passed, but Victor seemed unable to learn. The doctor grew discouraged and finally impatient. That's not good. "What's the use?" he shouted one day. "Go back to the forest, Victor. Live like an animal." Wow, that doesn't sound very nice. He saw Victor's eyes fill with tears. Pain, and then tears. Never before had the doctor seen him weep. He hugged Victor and rocked him as the boy wailed and sobbed, and the tears ran down his face. "Oh, forgive me, Victor. You're not an animal. You are a boy, a wonderful boy." "He will never learn to speak," thought the doctor sadly. He was alone in the silent woods too long. But he has learned to have feelings, and they can be hurt. Victor learned to recognize different colors and shapes, and then he learned to recognize letters. The doctor made an alphabet of cut-out letters, and Victor learned to spell lait, the French word for milk. He always took those letters with him when they went to a restaurant and used them to order milk for himself. Victor learned to read more and more words and to connect them to things and ideas, and he learned to write the words that he knew. One sweet spring morning, Victor woke and, without thinking, ran off to find the woods. He became lost in the suburbs of Paris and spent the night hiding in a park until the police found him. When Madame Guerin came for him, he hugged and kissed her and wept with joy. "I believe he loves Madame Guerin more than he loves me," the doctor said wistfully to himself. "That's natural, I suppose, in a boy." Victor loved setting the table or anything else he could do to be helpful. Sawing firewood filled him with happiness and pride. He loved the fragrant wood and the sound of the saw. He was skillful at feeding and tending the fires, and when he solved a difficult problem in his studies or the doctor praised him, he beamed with pleasure. He loved order and straightened his room every day. He combed his hair and polished his shoes. He wasn't wild anymore. But he did remain silent and could never tell of his wild life, and something of the wild was always in him. He loved pure icy water and loved to drink it slowly while looking out the window at the sky and the trees. The sound of a rising wind or the sight of whirling snowflakes or the sun bursting from behind a cloud still made him tremble with excitement and a wild joy. And every evening, when the doctor sat on Victor's bed, Victor took the doctor's hand and covered his own eyes and forehead with it and held it there, without moving, for a long while. They sat like this for an hour sometimes, and then the doctor would kiss him and say good night. He still likes looking at the moon, doesn't he? And if the doctor looked back in on him when the moon was full, Victor was always gazing up into it, perfectly still, bathed in silver light. I wonder what he sees, thought the doctor. I wonder what he feels. I wonder. And that is the end of the book. But they did say a little bit. It says the boy known as Victor, the wild child of Aveyron, was captured in the town of Saint-Sernin in the Aveyron district of southern France on January 8, 1800. After being studied by a local naturalist, he was sent to Paris for further study by scientists there. Almost all the experts declared Victor hopelessly retarded, but at a 26-year-old doctor, Jean-Marc Gaspard Itard, believed Victor's animal-like behavior and inability to speak were the result of having lived alone for years in the wild. He worked with Victor for 6 years, and while much progress was made, he never learned to speak. Dr. Itard wrote 2 reports on his work with the boy and became world famous. Many of the teaching methods he devised are now used in special education, and Maria Montessori based much of her work on his reports. Madame Guérin continued to care for Victor in a small house in Paris until he died in 1828, about the age of 40. His origins are still a mystery. Okay, boys and girls, that's it on the wild.